Hi, and welcome to the Politics of Justice. It's me, Amy Austin. So, are you ready for book two in the Casey Cort series? It is currently titled Ransom. So, I'm going to do a little introduction before I get into the book because I had to do some research. So, this book, Ransomed, was previously called Under Color of Law, and it is another rip from the headlines book in the sense that it was inspired by a case, the United States actually, against David W. Lanier, who in the 90s, 80s, and 90s was a judge in the state of Tennessee. So I actually had to do some research to find out what happened because I wrote the book in 2010, 2012, and I guess I had not followed up on the case at the time because it was sort of in my brain and I could write the book without it. I have enough imagination for that. So let's discuss. So I just looked it up. So David Lanier is dead. He was born in 1931. He died in 2021 in prison. Let's start with that. Um, let's start with that. And if he was 31 in 2021, he was in his obviously 80, 80 or 81, 80, well, 80 or 79, I guess, at the time he died. Okay. So David Lanier is from a, they used to call in Cleveland a judicial family, but a powerful family in the state of Tennessee. His father was well known in government, had a lot of power, and before David's father's death, the FBI was investigating him for corruption and various things. He died. And when he died, he had two sons who also came into power, a son named James O. Lanier, who I don't know what happened to him, but I know he died, and David W. Lanier. I don't actually know the setup of the Tennessee courts, but a lot of states have various names for various courts that do various things. In this case, they were in Tennessee, a place called Dyersburg. And then there were two counties involved, Lake, and I forget the name of the other county. And David W. Lanier originally came to the Chancery Court and then later to juvenile court. His nickname, this is like a women's whisper network type nickname, not not his name wasn't like Joe. His nickname was the Grabber. He was rumored to be a grabby guy who grabbed women, who knows where, we know where other people like to grab them, um, and engage in inappropriate behavior. But because his father was powerful, because his brother was powerful, because he was from a powerful family, no one dared cross him. So there's these stories out there, like a number of newspaper articles on this, of women who either came before him and felt intimidated by him, one worked for him and was sexually harassed by him, she says. And so there's a lot of like there's like a cloud around this guy. And one woman, he had a job. He When she pushed back, well, people who pushed back were worried that their lives were going to be hell. In some cases, like there's one woman who suggests that she really like pushed back against him, and then he was like, okay, I'll get you a job. But the job he got her was for a local doctor, and he suggested to the doctor that she was sexually available, and then that doctor like subsequently like sexually harassed her. So there's all of this like treating women poorly. So the two things that stood out for me, well, no, there's many things that stood out. Let's start with behavior in Tennessee. The two things that stood out for me was one, like he grabbed a woman like while on the bench, but like if you've ever been in court, like the bench is high and it obscures a lot. I always thought for the judge's privacy, but it obscures a lot. And people often stand behind them or next to them, and I don't know, like touches. I mean, like I've seen them like take drinks with water and do various things, but um, there are accusations that he grabbed people like while in court. And then came the litigants, and one woman alleges that when she pushed back against the sexual harassment, he threatened to take her kids away, and therefore she felt that she had to do what he wanted. Okay, so there weren't a lot of people, a lot of women, who were willing to come forward and accuse him because they would like to keep their livelihood, their jobs, not be passed around, keep their kids. And they do what women have done for time immemorial, as you'll hear about in any number of these like Me Too cases. They like lived with it and kept it moving and tried to like make it as small as possible in their life and tried to stay out of the wrath of people that could ruin their lives, their relationships, their careers, or take their children away. I mean, this is it's a problem. All that said, because the FBI had been like swirling around his dad, they heard about these cases and prosecuted him. He was prosecuted in federal court, um, under something called like the color of law. So people have the right, I guess, or not. Good think about this, to be free from harassment in that kind of context. And so he was convicted, and he went to federal prison. He appealed. So at the time of this case in like the 96, 97, 98, and so on, I lived in Ohio. And in obviously there's a state system. I'm going to talk to you about the federal system. There are circuit courts, and different circuits cover different geographical areas. Like, for instance, now I'm in the Ninth Circuit, which covers like the swath up and down the West Coast and Hawaii, and maybe Alaska too. I have to think about that. The Sixth Circuit at the time was Ohio, Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Michigan. I don't remember the fourth state. It's not Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. There's a fourth state. There were four states in the Sixth Circuit. Things I should Google before I record. And so, but the Sixth Circuit held all their cases in Tennessee. And at the time I lived in Ohio, my ex was a clerk for a senior judge in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I then, at the time, I sort of followed it because it was the thing we talked about. And what was interesting about this case is that they, I believe, affirmed his conviction, but then he appealed. And you can appeal to like an en banc, which means, in theory, the entire circuit hears it. But en banc usually is like, let's say there's like, I don't know, 20 appeals, so just 10 will be on the en banc, and it's more or less randomized. Um, and he appealed to the Sixth Circuit en banc, and they reversed his conviction. And what really sort of, the dissenters said this, and this is the thing that really, like shocked me. I don't know if it was shockable at this time. What interested me about this case is because women were afraid to go against him in state court. And there's like, I don't think anybody was not saying that it would be really impossible to convict him in state court, or because like his family was in like the prosecutor's office as well, that like they would not have prosecuted him. Like, would his brother have prosecuted him or whatever? Would people who work for his family prosecuted him? Probably not likely. So this federal court case was the only way to get him. And by with this reversal, the Sixth Circuit was suggesting that there was no way to punish somebody for his conduct. I don't think there was any question about his conduct. I don't think there was any question about the fact that his family, this is, other people said this, I don't know enough about Tennessee, owned Tennessee. And so then what kind of recourse do they have? So there's a thing, actually, I've had clients like this. There's a thing when you win an appeal, sometimes you can ask to be released pending like further action. Because if you win an appeal and your conviction is reversed, then in theory, um, you can be free. Well, it's determined whether or not that reversal stands. Yada yada yada. So he was freed um, upon pending this appeal, and I believe the United States, this would be the Justice Department, appealed to the Supreme Court. So he was out and about pending appeal, and believe it or not, because given the Supreme Court that we have today, you would have to imagine the Supreme Court of like 1997, 1998 reversed the appeal on the theory that you just can't have like no way to convict people of crimes. Whether or not that's good or not, I don't know. So, upon the reversal of the appeal, there's a mandate that he then has to surrender himself. It was like, by August 22nd of like 1990, whatever, 8 or something, you have to surrender yourself to the Justice Department, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal, whomever. So Lanier did not. The 2 years he had spent in prison, he like more or less said that was hell. He was in prison with bad people. Bad people. He was not bad people, like those were bad people. And he going back would be a death sentence. And if he went back, the judges would have blood on their hands. I mean, he did say all this. And because, And so honestly, he fled to Mexico. Okay, they couldn't find him. He fled to Mexico. They only found him when he went to go pick up his fake identity documents that he was going to then take to travel to who knows where. I don't know what his plan was. He didn't want to go back to prison. So I had to look this up because I was like, did he eventually go back to? So he did go back to prison, and died in prison. But after he went back to prison, there were a series of appeals where he felt that he shouldn't be prosecuted. And I think this is one of those like technicality sort of issues. I believe that who knows whether he would have won his appeals. I mean, the Supreme Court reversed, but he could have appealed. He was pro se for a lot of the time. Then he was represented by the federal public defender. He had all the avenues. The only reason, not the only reason, the main reason that he went back to prison and lost his appeals is because he was a fugitive. And as a fugitive, the court determined that if he did not turn himself in by X, Y, or date, then all of his appeals would be dismissed with prejudice, which means that he could not bring them again. Obviously, he was found. He did appeal again, and they were dismissed. And so then, he's in prison, the jail is shut, and he was in prison for 98, um, 20, 18, 20 years, and then died. By the way, in the obituary online, nothing about this. Nothing about him dying in prison. I was like Googling. I was like, if he didn't get out of prison, then he would die in prison. He died in like prison medical facilities, ancillary medical facilities for prisons, where people who were sick and dying die. I don't know what he died of. It did not say, and I did not Google this hard for this. But what really struck me about this case, and has me thinking about it now, although I was planning to do book two after book one, is that it appears. My belief is that there are certain people who are above the law for pick your reason. Pick your reason. But when it comes to the abuse of women, there seems to be like a lot of people throw up their hands and they have like no way of prosecuting people who we know are like pedophiles or trafficking people or are using their position to abuse women, and suddenly we have no idea how to prosecute people. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? So that's sort of like where this case lives in my head. So about the book. So I started Okay, I wrote book one and I was running around trying to get an agent and well, I got an agent, but trying to get it published. And it was a no go. And then in the meantime, I published a couple of romances and I was like, okay, if I can get romances traditionally published, I must be a good enough writer. Let's try to get this book published again. No go. So I think in that time, no, if I said it was two and I wrote in 2012, I don't think I'd yet independently published the first book, but I had learned a little or a lot about the publishing industry in the meanwhile and knew that my case would be stronger for publishing the first Casey Cort book if I was writing a second and could sell it as a series. Like, I have like book one, I've introduced this character, she has serious appeal or serious potential or whatever you would say in a proposal, and therefore you should buy this book. That didn't happen. Nobody bought the book. I mean, no publisher bought the book. So when I independently published book one, I already had written maybe half of book two. I have to look at the dates. I actually don't know that. But let me say this. I'd started book two and I was like, serious potential. Like, this is going to like launch my career or whatever. I'm going to be the next Michael Connelly, James Patterson, Elizabeth George, series, Karen Slaughter, whatever, you name it. This is like, was my plan. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write this book. Then I got pregnant. And I was like, okay, while I'm pregnant, but before I have a baby and my time is swallowed up by that, I'm going to finish this book. Let me tell you, that did not happen. I think it's all kind of vague. I think I got obsessed with crown molding, paint colors, cribs, and random stuff that like you wonder, like, I think it's like this like nesting instinct that women get when they're pregnant. That's what I was doing in the time I was pregnant and theoretically going to write that book. Look up 2 years later, and I think by then I'd maybe written like three romances. The third one had been picked up by this publisher, and a different publisher than the first, because I was like, let's try again. And had picked up by this publisher, and I was like, okay, but I still think I want to write this series. And independent publishing has like gone through like a mini revolution in the time that I had a baby. So let me sit down and finish book two. I had written half a book like 2 or 3 years earlier, and I sat down to write the second half of the book. Oh boy. I will say this. Reading the book, this is when I learned about like the writing brain or my writing brain. The gap made no difference. Like, the story to me reads cohesively. As so you don't need to be inspired. You can start and stop, and it'll be the same. Maybe not 10 years later, but earlier when my writing was a little bit rougher, it was consistent. So I sat down to write this book and to flesh out the idea of whether or not men who abused women but were also in power could not be prosecuted and were not held accountable. So that's, but I'm thinking about it a lot now because unfortunately in the morning, I swear I'm not going to doom scroll. And I'm like, let me just I'm just going to check the headlines. I'm just going to sign into Google News and just check the headlines. And every headline is, well, except for the British people who apparently took some royal person into custody. The American headlines are, well, we don't know what they did. We don't know if these Epstein like people like who appeared like are convicted. I started reading like Nobody's Girl, and I'm like, it's not, don't. Anyway, so with that, I have a lot of thoughts about whether or not it's. Let me say this. It's not that I've lost hope, but it's the same repeating thing. Women get abused by powerful men and nothing happens. And like the Lanier case, the way it's described, like in like when I was Googling now, it's like the judge who got off, and like it's described as this like outlier injustice, and like in any other world, like he would be convicted for what he did. But I look up, it is nearly, oh my God, they need six, oh my God, 30 years later, and little has changed. So, with that, I bid you adieu. In the next few weeks, we'll be breaking down Ransomed, the second book in the Casey Cort series. See you soon. Oh, by the way, okay, I'm learning. If you're interested in keeping up with the Casey Cort series and my channel as well as A Time to Thrill, I would like you to like, subscribe, share, and you can hype the video. I don't have hypes, so I don't know who does. My son doesn't have hypes. I've met nobody who has these like mysterious hypes. Um, but if you do and it's eligible, feel free. Until next time.